Hello everybody, and welcome to number 2 in the Insight series. Today we're very lucky to have May Chen here. May is the chair of the Super Diversity Centre. She also is on the BNZ board and is responsible for health and safety on the board, as well as being on the people committee of that board. So very engaged as a director in health and safety, as well as being one of New Zealand's top employment lawyers. So welcome May, welcome
Thanks,
to the
Nicole.
discussion today. Why we wanted to talk to May was Super Diversity Centre and the challenges of diversity in a changing diverse workforce in New Zealand. What's it all about?
So the big why is because New Zealand is already super diverse, defined as 25% or more of New Zealanders not born in the country, or a country with 100 or more ethnicities. Of course, in Auckland, we're way above that. In Auckland, we're kind of 48% not born in New Zealand, and of course, in the 2013 census, there were 213 ethnicities. Just think what the 2018 census will be. So really what I'm saying to you is that the population has already demographically transformed. So this has a big impact on the worker talent pool. Already in Auckland, but diffusing right throughout New Zealand, are a whole pile of migrants and their New Zealand born children. So it's complex, but obviously when you immigrate to a new country, you often end up taking a job below the position or status that you had back in your home country. People don't know you, you've got no networks, and if you don't speak English well, it's pretty hard to impress people that they should appoint you to a high-paid job. So as a consequence of that, you can end up with migrants in more physical roles than they've had before, and they get injured. You can end up with a lot of migrants who don't speak English, and particularly for migrants who come to this country when they are adults, the research clearly shows that it's really difficult to become fluent in English. So you could have people who've been here for 20 or 30 years, they still speak very limited English.
So, I mean, that's a really interesting insight. Actually, Peter Crisp, who we had on the last Insights, talked about different cultures and a power distance relationship, and also that, if in New Zealand, if you're a New Zealander, you need to understand the why and what's in it for me before you'll follow a rule. If you're from, say, a lot of the Asian countries, they have very high power distance and very high respect for authority. So they will follow the rules to the letter, or if there's no rules, they probably won't know necessarily what to do.
Well, also, if you've got a system with reporting and whistleblowing, they don't report a whistleblow because if they're not going to dob themselves in because it's a loss of big face. Yes. Sometimes they've got poor immigrant status. In other words, they shouldn't be working, or they're illegally working, so yes. they don't want to say anything. And of course, they don't want to dob their employer in. So, of course, what happens is that if you've got a low power distance employer who says to the worker, well, figure it out, use your common sense, it's number 8, why, off you go, use your initiative, that's going to be really difficult because that's not the tradition they come from. Their tradition is loyalty and obedience. So they're looking for high prescriptiveness. And if you tell them just to, use your common sense, they will say, well, what is that?
Yeah. I think it's a really important point. I mean, in my previous slides, we did some work on different cultures and how you would need to apply exactly the same health and safety standards across multiple countries.
And what did you find?
Well, one of the observations in that, which I think was you've completely touched on, is that your KPIs, or what you talk about as important, needs to change, particularly around things like health and safety if you want to drive the right behaviour. So if you put it in KPI of no accidents or that there will be no harm in our workplace,
they won't report anything.
There will be no reporting of anything.
Right.
But if you put in a KPI around near misses on key controls, or we want to hear of any instances where people have been seen on scaffolding without full protection, or
they will be obedient.
They will be excellent at doing that.
They will do what you want.
And so this is really important, I think. So, and this is true in any workplace, just understanding the people that you're working with, that actually effective health and safety is about engagement with the people doing the job at the front line. And the big thing we're missing in New Zealand is a lot of the people exposed to what I would call the critical risks, the things that kill you, say, farm workers using the quad bikes, or construction workers building the homes, or factory workers in South Auckland working with manufacturing.
So let's think about that, the farm worker. We know now from the statistics that 2 out of every 3 farm worker comes from South America or the Philippines. So, once again, construction, Christchurch rebuild, mainly Filipino workers coming in there doing construction, and temporary workers. And we know that in construction you often, get a lot of temporary workers who may be migrant workers. So the issue for employers is not to presume that one culture fits all, and that when you give us a health and safety briefing you can do it the same way for all of them and they'll all pick it up and they'll all understand it. Actually, as you know, different cultures have different preferences for the way they learn.
Yes.
Some people don't speak English awfully well, so actually pictures are better than words. And of course there are a whole pile of factors which may affect the way in which they interpret whatever it is you say to them. I mean, once again, a generalisation, but Samoan workers have a different approach to viewing risk. They probably are used to taking higher risks. So, if they get a bit injured, they don't report it. I mean, if they get completely disabled, they will.
Yes.
But, it's got to be, as far as they're concerned, they don't really report anything unless it falls within the definition of notifiable, really, under the Act.
Yeah, that's right. So if you're one of those employers who's wanting to do more and to understand diversity more, or you've got challenges in your workplace with a diverse culture that you think you need help with, where should you go to get help, or what should you do?
Look, it's a really good practical question. And the first thing you've got to do as an employer is just get to know your staff. So it's really important that you do collect ethnicity data. You need to know who you're employing on your floor, and then you need to figure out, you can't just say, we got 10% Chinese. Where are they from? I mean, if they're born in the United States or Singapore, they must speak English. But if they're from mainland China, they are likely to have poor English. So it is important as an employer to take the time to figure out where your workers are from, and then you need to ask them.
We talked about get to know your people, get to know where they're from, actually understand it from their perspective, and actually what they're actually hearing, just confirm that. But it's actually more than that, isn't it? It's actually, as a leader of a business that's employing these people, it's actually looking at ways to effectively understand and communicate and support your workers to be able to engage in the conversation in a meaningful
way. And Nicole, employers do that. They come to the Super Diversity Centre and say, my God, we've had a death and then we had another one. What the hell's going on? And then we find the ethnicity of the staff member is the same. And actually it's a cultural issue. It's a cultural issue because, if they're Pacifica workers, they're very religious and they're very hard-working, and so that they wanted to please, but they also had a literacy issue, and their English was poor, so they were working actually 2 jobs, and they got fatigued. And that's how the accident happened. They also had a different way of looking at risk, and they didn't want to displease the employer because they didn't want to lose their job. So they said yes when it was actually a little bit outside the scope of their role. And so you can see all of the combination of factors. On top of that, sometimes what you find is that some of these ethnic workers are discriminated against. So they're feeling a little bit distressed, they're feeling a little bit ostracised. Of course, the way that you do things if you've got no idea what you're doing is you just imitate everybody else. So they're trying to copy other people, but it's not like anyone's looking out for them because they don't really have mates. They don't have mates because they don't really speak English. So what happens is the other workers don't talk to them. Or they think they're odd, because they eat funny things or they do funny things.
What's your view on the role of the boss and what they should be doing in terms of their behaviours and the importance of them in terms of changing the health and safety conversation and the way that workers respond to that?
Oh, I just think it's so important because otherwise they just get confused. You say one thing, but the big boss isn't doing it, You say that health and safety is really important, but I don't see the big boss really valuing well-being or a healthy and safe workplace. So I think that the obligation of leadership here is really what the Health and Safety at Work Act is. I mean, call it a PCBU, call it whatever you like, but at the end of the day, it's about those at the top setting the culture.
If you are one of those leaders that wants to make a difference in this space, because I think the majority of New Zealand businesses fit into that category and are genuinely wanting to make the right choices, where would you start? I mean, it sounds like induction is really, really important.
Yeah, the onboarding is really important because remember, there's a whole pile of us who've been here a while and know what's going on. So we have to get properly inducted because actually the rest of them are watching us. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing, so they're watching you. If you don't do it right, they won't do it right either. Also, you don't really understand why you're doing this.
I mean, there's no question that increasingly people are realising good health and safety is good for business, and this is just a subset of this, right? Highly engaged, productive workers do create highly successful businesses. So if you've done any work on if you get your diversity right, if you do track diversity, if you customise or change the way you lead and implement, say, risk management, which would be health and safety, or other things that you're wanting to do, what is the benefit? Why should I do this if I'm a business?
You should do it because actually, even on the ethnic worker front, let alone the non-ethnic workers, you'll find people are a lot happier and you will retain them for longer and they'll be much more loyal and they'll work much harder because they're happier and they feel safe. And so, of course, what they find with migrant workers is that they're particularly loyal because they're very grateful for the job. And if you're a good employer, then they will give back to you. I think the issue here is to understand that as New Zealand demographically transforms, and this is not a future issue, it's a now issue, Nicole.
Yes, right now.
We can't afford to not think about this because otherwise the problem is going to get worse. We are going to end up with higher injury stats. And if people don't feel able to report now, they'll wait until they're really injured. And then that's really going to have a bad impact. Even if it was just the bottom line of making sure that your premiums to ACC stay low because of injury prevention, it's worth it. Yep. But at the end of the day, no employer takes any comfort from being in a workplace that kills and maims people. Yep. We go to work because we want to earn an honest dollar and do good things for the world. So it's a bit of a no-brainer, really, and all I think we're trying to say is if you haven't thought about it, you need to consciously think about it.
Exactly right.
And that mental health includes your staff not being discriminated against, either by the employer or by fellow workers for their race and gender. They find that ethnic women, in the research, actually suffer worse in a workplace.
And bullying and harassment.
Yeah, because they got the gender thing going, they've got the race thing going, then they've got cultural things going which may have limitations for their particular gender, and then on top of that they have more family responsibilities than anybody else.
Yes.
So, once again, complex, but you've got to get your head around it because at the end of the day, you've got to know your workers.
Thanks so much, May. I think it's such an important issue, diversity and super diversity in New Zealand, and the importance of that when you're considering health and safety. So really important, really key part of us all managing our workplaces effectively, and particularly looking at the leadership piece and the engagement piece, how you're engaging with your diverse workforce, but also how we as leaders are all leading around that. So really great insights, thanks for that. This was Insights number 2. Insights number 3 will be coming shortly.